What is going on, everybody? Good afternoon. We almost made it to the end of the week, and we got to talk a little bit about maybe the best player left on the Seahawks roster at this point. I'm talking about DK Metcalf. A lot of discussion about this guy lately, a lot of back and forth with the fan base, and probably some back and forth within the organization about what his future is. And there is some smoke here that DK Metcalf may not be here much longer. No fire yet, but we've seen a little bit of smoke. There was one particular quote from John Schneider on 710 yesterday afternoon that I think should at least register with some people. So, Schneider was asked about extending DK Metcalf. And he said the things that you would expect Schneider to say politically. They love him. They emphasized how impactful he is. But he also said that there was a sense of shock at the size of recent wide receiver deals. So basically what he's saying is, yeah, we love Metcalf. We think he's awesome. But we were not expecting guys like Davante Adams to get $28 million and Tyreek to get $30 million. Because that's going to impact what DK Metcalf may end up getting. DK Metcalf didn't have his best year in 2021, but he's probably going to be able to demand not that far off from top of the market money. Before the recent Davante Adams and Tyreek Hill deals, I would have said that you could probably get Metcalf back for about $21 million a year, but with the Davante Adams and Tyreek deals, I think you're edging closer to that $25 million a year deal. Probably something like 4 years, $100 million. And there is a little bit of sticker shock there, that's for sure. So this obviously does indicate on some level that there might not be that DK Metcalf extension. And if there's not an extension, you would assume that there may very well be a trade in the works regarding DK Metcalf. So I want to talk about this a little bit here because this is going to become one of the most interesting subplots going forward. If you are going to move Metcalf, you kind of have to do it either before or during the first hour of the draft because you need to be able to get first-round picks this year, or else there's really no way to make that trade work. You might need to say, hey, Green Bay, give us both your first-round picks, you can have Metcalf. There was some talk that the Jets might want him. What if the Jets were willing to give up number 4 overall for Metcalf? What if they were willing to give up the number 10 pick that they gave you, that you gave them in the Jamal Adams trade, etc.? So I read this quote, and I gotta say, I made this comparison on the Hawks Nest stream the other day, but this quote sounds an awful lot to me of like when I was a little kid and I would go to McDonald's with my grandmother and she just lost her mind at how expensive stuff was, right? Like, and that's understandable to a certain extent. My grandmother, she grew up in the Great Depression. She looks at those prices at McDonald's and she's like, are you kidding me? You know, I remember when this stuff cost less than $1. You could get a full meal for less than $1. I mean, my grandmother remembers when gas was 15 cents a gallon. My grandmother remembers when a can of Coke was a nickel. So it makes sense. But, however, and here's the thing, here's what I'm going to say. This is the way things are. Every team in the league is at some position on some level paying an amount of money to a player that seems ridiculous, not just 60 years ago, like the McDonald's example or the gas example, not just 30 years ago or 10 years ago, but 4 years ago, that amount of money would have seemed ridiculous. Every team in the league is willing to do that, and many of them have done it. So this just sounds like somebody who is out of touch, just going into cardiac arrest because they can't believe how big these contracts have gotten. And it almost sounds like he's trying to prepare to justify a future move of not paying Metcalf and possibly moving him. So here's what I'm going to say about this situation. The Metcalf contract, whenever it gets offered to him and he signs it, assuming we do, and at this point I still think that we will, This is a young player who we have not gotten the best out of. He's young. He's not that much older than the wide receivers you could get in this draft. Like going into his fourth year, he's only a couple years older than some of the rookie wide receivers you could get. He's got his best football in front of him. When you look at the guys the Seahawks have moved on from who were good players, almost always they at least get the best years out of them. Even in the case of Frank Clark. Frank Clark had his best year his last year in Seattle. He went to Kansas City. He was good, and he had a nice playoff run when they won the Super Bowl, but he was not even close to being as effective as he was in that 2018 season overall. So I think it will happen, but let's talk about this for a second. So you got to understand that if DK signs a 4-year, $100 million extension in the next few weeks, it's going to look big. But I want to remind people that the cap is going to keep going up. That is the most important thing to remember here when it comes to any contract that you see. Yes, the Davante Adams contract looks ridiculous right now. What was it, $28 million a year? That looks insane. That's quarterback money to a wide receiver. But by the time that contract is kicking in, it's not going to be quarterback money. Quarterback money is going to be 60, 65, 70 million a year. Okay? Not only is the cap going up by, I'd say 20, 30 million a year by default, there are heavy rumors that the NFL Sunday Ticket deal with Amazon is going to generate $7.5 billion of extra money for the NFL a year. And if you do the math and you take out the expected fees and the stuff that the team is not going to dump into the salary cap, you're still coming out at about a $50 to $55 million increase in the salary cap for each team, plus whatever it was going to be anyway. So in 2023, the salary cap may end up being something like 80 million more than it is right now. So I don't want to hear this team cry poverty and be like, oh, we just can't afford these guys. We're the Oakland Athletics over here. We're the Miami Marlins. We just can't afford the top players. You absolutely can afford them, especially when you don't have a quarterback right now. I don't think we have any quarterback, period, on the roster for 2023 when the big money for Metcalf is going to start to kick in if you extend him. So this idea that you can't afford it after dealing Wilson, after moving on from Wagner, it smacks of a complete grift to me. It just smacks of a complete, like, trying to pretend like you're impoverished when you absolutely can make this work if you want to. You just don't want to, but you're trying to get the fans to feel bad for you, so you start crying about money. When the reality is, now that Davante and Tyreek have signed these deals, not only is Metcalf's deal probably going to be not too far away from that range, but you're going to see it for other receivers, other elite receivers. You're going to see the same stuff for A.J. Brown. In a couple years, you'll see the same thing for CeeDee Lamb. These wide receiver contracts are going to be matching that. So are you going to be the one team that is unwilling to go that high? That just goes, no, sorry, we can't do it. 20 million or we're sending you out of here. Because if you're going to do it there, are you going to do it at other positions as well? You kind of did it with Wilson to a certain extent. That's a little different. But are you just going to say, no, we're just going to be cheap all the time. We're just never going to spend money. Not even on the elite players. Because that's not a team that's going to win anything. So by the time the big money in DK Metcalf's hypothetical extension kicks in, the cap is going to be huge. 300 million, 350 million. It could get up to 400 million in less than a decade, I think. So with that in mind, you have to realize that by the time the big money kicks in, it's not going to seem that bad. Great example. When Russell Wilson signed his first extension back after the 2014 season, so 2015, it seemed like a big deal. That was a big contract. It was like, wow, he got some money. And then a little later, Brock Osweiler got almost the same contract. It was not that different. And then suddenly we were like, oh, wow, that's a hell of a contract we got Wilson to. Brock Osweiler has won 6 games, and he got almost the same contract. I think it was like 72 million to Wilson's 80 million. That kind of stuff just keeps happening. So I don't want to hear this from John Schneider that there's a sense of shock. You're a GM in the NFL. You need to know what's coming. Like Hawks Nest said in our stream last night, you need to be prepared for this stuff. And if you were going to feel this way, you should have gotten the Metcalf extension done earlier. And beyond just this idea of extending him, because again, I do support extending him. I think that's the right move to make here. That's what I want to do. I believe Metcalf has the potential to be the best or a top 3 receiver in the NFL if you put him in the right situation, give him the right quarterback. However, if you decide not to do that, I do want to point out here that this is not a moment of truth for DK Metcalf. You could say, okay, you want to play out the rest of your rookie deal? That's fine. Remember, DK Metcalf has not really made very much money in the NFL yet. And he is a guy who dealt with some injury issues in college, which is why he fell in the draft. So he's probably eager to lock in a bag. Maybe the bag won't be quite as big as he could have gotten in a different scenario, but he's not necessarily somebody who's going to fight for every dollar. He's just happy to get the $100 million that he'll probably end up getting. He's not going to sit around and pout because he didn't get 105 or 110. And if he continues to be a pain about that, you have the franchise tag. You can say, okay, look, we're going to make you play the rest of your rookie deal, and then we're going to franchise tag you twice. Combined value of those 2 franchise tags probably going to be somewhere around 25, 26 million a year. So you can either make 52, 53 million over the next 3 years, or you can make 100 million over the next 4 years. This is something that me and the Hawks Nest talked about a lot in our stream last night, but just to put the numbers out there, it's no question which one you would rather do. And I know that technically he could hold out, but the NFL has come down pretty hard on that kind of stuff, so you kind of can't. So yeah, I don't want to hear this from John Schneider. You just gave Will Dissly $8 million a year. Or, well, I know technically it's more like $6.5 million a year, but you just gave Will Dissly, a backup blocking tight end, a bunch of money. Okay, you just gave Quandre Diggs, coming off a massive leg injury, a literal broken leg, $40 million. He's going to be counting almost $20 million against the cap in 2023. So don't tell me you don't have the money when you just got Wilson out of here. And that $40 million cap hit that you were looking at in 2023 just went to 0. You can afford it. So stop being a boomer. Stop with the old back in my day players only made $1 million a year crap. I don't want to hear it. This just when I heard this quote, it just sounded to me so much like my like my grandmother, like I said, and I love my grandmother, but and she can't help it. It's not like it's necessarily her fault. Times changed, and she still remembered how things were when she was younger. And to her, a large order of French fries costing $2 was crazy to her. And one day, maybe it'll be $10 for an order of large fries from McDonald's, and it'll be crazy to me. But if that's the going rate, then that is the going rate. And if our front office is not willing to play ball with these rates that are generally agreed on by the entire NFL, then something tells me we need another front office. But a lot of things have been telling me that lately. All right, so that's my take on the DK Metcalf stuff. I would definitely be willing to extend him. I think 4 years for $100 million is something you could lock in. Maybe a little bit more, but not an extreme amount more. And I just don't want to hear this kind of stuff. This kind of stuff is just complete nonsense to me. You have the same salary cap as every other team in the league. So if they're able to do it, why aren't you doing it? See you guys later. Go Hawks.